Hey guys, tonight we travel to a place where even your breath freezes mid-laugh and falls to the ground like a small ghost. Welcome to Oymyakon, the coldest village in history. You wake before the sun dares to appear, wrapped in a cocoon of quilts that smell faintly of smoke and sheep's wool. The walls of your wooden cabin sigh as the night air presses its claws against them, and every creak sounds like ice complaining. You wouldn't survive this morning without fire. Not for long, not even if you tried to impress the locals. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is there right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first sound of your day is the iron stove ticking in protest as it tries to remember warmth. Ashes from the night's last coal lie dormant, faintly grey, and you feed them with kindling so dry it cracks like bones. The match's hiss feels almost violent in this silence. As orange light stirs inside the stove's belly, a puff of smoke sneaks through a gap in the pipe and kisses your face with the taste of carbon and resin. Around you frost has crept deep into every corner, on the window, on the kettle, even on the nails hammered into the wall. Each breath leaves a halo that glows faintly in the half-dark, shimmering before dissolving. Somewhere outside, a dog barks once and immediately regrets it, the sound swallowed by the endless cold. Not far from the stove, a tin cup waits beside the kettle. The water inside it has turned to glass overnight. You nudge it toward the stove's warmth, listening to it crack and sigh as it begins to thaw. The air smells faintly of pine resin, smoke, and wool, every molecule moving reluctantly, as if cold had weight. The thermometer nailed beside the door reads 63 degrees Celsius, though you stopped trusting its honesty years ago. Some say it once showed 71 degrees Celsius, a number that earned Oymyakon its quiet fame and its permanent shiver in the world's imagination. The villagers call it the Pole of Cold, as if the earth had decided that this one valley deserved to keep winter as a pet. Outside the walls, darkness lingers like a shy guest that refuses to leave. The sky glows a deep indigo, and stars tremble above the ridges of the Verkhoyansk range. The snow doesn't sparkle here, it glints like crushed glass. You know that by the time light reaches the valley floor, the air will have lost none of its bite. Even in summer, this place never truly forgets. Its rivers freeze to the bottom, the ground locks into permafrost, and trees hunch low like old men guarding secrets. Every surface is a slow exhalation of frost, fences, sledges, even the eyelashes of the horses that snort clouds into the dim morning. You reach for your boots, stiff as iron, and your fingers ache before you've even tied them. The smell of leather and seal oil mixes with the faint sweetness of birch smoke drifting through the vent. It takes 3 minutes of breathing through your scarf before you're ready to step outside. The door sticks, frozen to the frame, and when it finally opens it releases a plume of white air that looks alive. Sound moves differently here. It's sharp, immediate, without echo. The snow under your boots squeals in that dry, crystalline pitch that only happens below -50, a noise both brittle and satisfying. Somewhere down the slope, the river lies hidden under several meters of ice, but you can still hear it faintly, a deep, distant rumble like the world's stomach growling in its sleep. Your neighbor's house glows faintly ahead, a blur of yellow behind curtains thick as armor. Every house burns its own small sun. In this place, fire is not a luxury, but a moral duty. Locals joke that you can judge a person's character by how their chimney smokes. Steady means responsible, sputtering means lazy, none means a funeral soon. Humor here always hides a kernel of survival. A man once tried to prove that vodka wouldn't freeze if pure enough, left his bottle outside overnight, and found it solid as quartz by morning. He laughed anyway. What else can you do when even alcohol gives up? You step toward the small shed where the family's old truck idles, a gentle mechanical heartbeat in the otherwise frozen stillness. In Oymyakon, Engines must never sleep. If they stop, the oil thickens like glue, the fuel crystallizes and metal shrinks until it cracks. The air smells of diesel and frost, a strange metallic perfume. The man who owns the truck has rigged a blanket of reindeer hides over the hood, muttering that it keeps the spirit of the machine warm. When he speaks, his words come out as small white ribbons that freeze mid-air and hang there for a second before fading. He waves, his gloves stiff, and you wave back, knowing that even short greetings risk frostbite if prolonged. The sun finally brushes the horizon. Though sun here is generous, it's more a smear of light, a suggestion of warmth. Shadows remain long, blue, and unbending. The village stirs slowly, smoke thickens above roofs, dogs stretch in woolly silence, and somewhere a radio crackles in a language of static and Yakut folk music. Inside each home, tea is being poured from heavy kettles, black as ink and steaming like confession. The locals drink it strong, unsweetened, sometimes salted. The tea is less about taste and more about proof that heat still exists. A slice of frozen fish, sliced thin enough to shatter between the teeth, passes for breakfast. Its texture is curious, somewhere between velvet and glass, and the salt burns pleasantly against the tongue. As you eat, the talk turns, as it always does, to the weather. Not to complain, complaint has no currency here, but to share. 55 this morning, someone says, but dry, that matters. A humid 30 bites worse. Someone else claims their thermometer broke again, the mercury retreating into its bulb like a frightened animal. An old woman chuckles, saying the frost spirits have grown bored of counting. This is an old Yakut belief, that cold itself has a soul, invisible and patient, and one must not boast against it. The villagers leave small offerings near the river bend, where a hot spring steams all year round. It's the only patch of water that never freezes, a reminder that even the earth needs to breathe somewhere. By mid-morning, if you can call it that, the air inside the cabin grows clearer, almost forgiving. You peel off one layer, feel your skin protest, then decide against it. There's comfort in the armor, the stove hums softly, and you sit near it, thawing your boots while the smell of birch tar fills the air. Outside, the dogs resume their restless choreography, pacing between houses, their fur frosted into grey halos. Somewhere in the distance, a snowmobile growls faintly, a modern intruder in an ancient rhythm. Its rider will likely spend the day checking traps or hauling supplies from the next settlement, 40 kilometers away across unbroken white. By the time the short light begins to fade again, your breath has grown used to the slow rhythm of the cold. The shock becomes background, like static. You no longer flinch at the sting on your cheeks or the numb hum of your fingers. It's as if the body learns the language of frost, each cell negotiating for survival. You step outside one last time before dusk deepens, watching your shadow merge with the long silhouettes of frozen poles and silent trees. Above, the sky ripens into violet, and for a brief moment the world holds its breath. Then the first hint of the aurora wavers, green ribbons trembling like silk over the roofline. Even the dogs pause. In this moment, Oymyakon feels less like a punishment and more like an ancient secret the world forgot to erase. You return indoors, close the door, and listen to the latch click shut with the finality of a heartbeat. The room hums again with warmth. The frost on the window begins to soften, and the faint reflection of your face swims there, cheeks raw, eyes bright, steam curling from your scarf. You smile because despite everything, life continues. Somewhere far away, people complain of winter, and you think they've never met a real one. Here, where the air itself seems older than time, survival feels like a quiet form of poetry. You sit by the stove, pour another cup of tea, and let the steam touch your face like a blessing. The morning hardens into something brighter yet no less cruel. A milky sun drifts just above the tree line, refusing to climb higher, as though it too has accepted the terms of Oymyakon's endless frost. The air inside your cabin feels warmer by comparison, but that's a lie, the kind of gentle deceit only your stove can tell. It's time to dress for the day, an act so elaborate it feels more like architecture than routine. The first layer is linen, worn smooth from years of washing and freezing and thawing again. It clings to your skin like a memory of warmth. Over it goes wool, thick, coarse, and scratchy enough to remind you that life itself is still attached. The smell of lanolin lingers. It's the scent of endurance of sheep who never asked to be this important. Your breath fogs the air as you pull on trousers padded with deer hair, a material both prickly and divine. Each garment carries a faint rattle of frost as if whispering to the next layer in a language of survival. Outside the window, the sound of sled runners creaks against the snow. The rhythm is steady, calm, and somehow comforting. The driver's scarf flaps stiffly in the brittle air, and a pair of reindeer snort plumes of steam that freeze mid-flight. Somewhere, a child laughs, a bright, crystalline sound that breaks the monotony of silence like a single candle in a cathedral. You reach for the parka, its fur-lined hood broad enough to frame your face in a halo of silver fox. The sleeves resist your movements at first. They remember yesterday's cold. Next come mittens stitched from dog hide, softer than they look, their inner lining of rabbit fur still faintly warm from last night's sleep near the stove. Even the smallest gap between sleeve and cuff feels dangerous. Locals know that 1 inch of exposed skin is a conversation with frostbite you might not win. A muffled thud from outside draws your attention. Your neighbor Vasily has dropped his hammer. He picks it up bare-handed before realizing what he's done. His glove lies a few feet away, fallen into the snow. For half a heartbeat he hesitates. Knowing the rule, touch metal, 60 degrees Celsius, and the metal takes its payment immediately. He flings the hammer into a drift, swearing under his breath. His breath crackles audibly, a brief electric sound before dissolving into the air. You nod to him through the window. He shrugs, smiling with that peculiar pride of people who live where the world should not. The smell of diesel returns as another truck rumbles to life. Engines here are the village's pulse, each one a fragile miracle of combustion in a place that seems designed to end such things. Even the fuel must be special, a blend that resists solidifying in temperatures that can turn rubber to glass. Mechanics often joke that their real religion is antifreeze. It's not far from the truth. You step outside again, this time wrapped like a matryoshka of fabrics and prayers. The cold hits like a wall. No, like a presence. It doesn't bite. It presses. It fills your lungs with needles and insists you breathe slower, smaller. Sound flattens, distance contracts, and time itself feels slower, as though the air has thickened. The snow underfoot squeaks like a violin string being plucked too tightly. Your eyelashes gather frost until the world around you shimmers through a crystal lens. Near the storehouse, the butcher works in the open, his breath streaming upward like a slow-moving spirit. Meat stays fresh indefinitely here, no need for cellars, only hooks. The frozen slabs hang stiffly in the air, red fading to grey-white, glittering slightly in the sunlight. He raises a cleaver, and it sings through the stillness with a tone pure as a bell. The cut piece lands with the soft thud of stone, not flesh. He smiles at your stare and says, "Cold is our freezer and our friend." The words emerge brittle but kind, as though he's explaining the weather to a child. The smell of fish wafts from a distance. A woman in layers of felt boots and bright patterned shawls stands over a wooden board, slicing frozen river trout, thin enough to curl at the edges. The pieces are translucent, like stained glass tinted with rose and amber. She arranges them neatly in a bowl of snow, her gloved hands moving with grace and certainty. This dish, stroganoff, is both meal and art. You try a sliver. It's delicate, salty, and shockingly sweet, melting on your tongue like memory rather than food. Around midday, if such a word has meaning here, the faintest wind stirs. It comes from the northeast, carrying the dry scent of ice and distant pine. The village's few trees stand crooked, bent by decades of this invisible hand. Even sound travels differently now. Dogs bark once and fall silent, as if conserving the energy of noise. A crow calls overhead, its voice thin and metallic, and you realize it's the only bird you've seen all day. You glance toward the ridge that cradles the valley. Above it, the air dances faintly with heatless light, the prelude to the aurora, though it's far too early for night. Still, the shimmer feels like promise. People here often say that when the sky moves, it means the world remembers you. Inside your parka, sweat prickles at your neck. That's the paradox. One moment you're freezing, the next overheating inside your cocoon. You open your hood slightly, letting a thread of cold air snake down your spine. It feels almost luxurious. For a few minutes you imagine that you could live this way forever, balanced precisely between ice and flame, hardship and serenity. Then your breath catches again, reminding you that comfort here is always temporary, always rented. When you return indoors, the cabin feels almost tropical. Steam curls from the kettle's spout, and the smell of pinewood sap hangs thick in the air. Your scarf is crusted with frost, the ice crystals catching the light like embroidery. You peel layers away one by one, each revealing a smaller, warmer version of yourself, until finally you stand in linen again, the body flushed and grateful. You sit beside the window, watching frost creep back across the glass. The pattern it weaves resembles feathers or ferns, nature's slow handwriting. Beyond it, the world remains motionless, wrapped in its great white hush. You think of how far this place is from anything else, how the nearest city lies days away by frozen road, how the post arrives less often than the moon. Yet somehow people have chosen to stay, to build lives here, raise children, celebrate birthdays and mend mittens by the fire. The cold may define Oymyakon, but it doesn't own it. The villager's stubborn warmth is a quiet rebellion that glows brighter than any sun. Later, as dusk begins its slow descent, you lean closer to the window. A halo forms around your reflection, skin pink, breath fogging the glass. The sight makes you smile. The outside world may still be locked at -60, but for now the small stove hums, the tea is sweet, and your heart beats evenly. The air hums faintly, like snow whispering secrets to itself. Tomorrow the temperature might drop again. The thermometer could hide its mercury completely, surrendering to blankness. But tonight, the layers hold. You feel the fatigue settle in, the pleasant ache of survival, of having moved through the impossible and found it almost beautiful. The fire murmurs and the walls answer softly, expanding with heat. You take another sip of tea, its warmth climbing through you like sunlight through stone. Outside, the snow reflects a dim violet glow. Somewhere in the distance, a dog howls once, a sound long and melancholy, echoing the frozen hills. The howl fades into silence, leaving only the faint crackle of the stove, steady and faithful. Here in the heart of the world's coldest village, you've learned the quiet arithmetic of existence. Add enough layers, subtract nothing from your courage, and multiply the warmth you find wherever it hides. The morning deepens into that peculiar midwinter rhythm where light and shadow mingle in half-truths. Nothing here is truly bright. Everything glows faintly like memory. Inside your cabin, the stove hums a low metallic note, and the smell of scorched pine sap lingers like incense. It's time for tea. Always tea. The kettle sits on the iron plate, blackened from decades of use. You lift it with a rag to test its weight, feeling how slow water moves when it's half frozen. A hiss begins, gentle at first, then steady, a sound that feels alive. When the lid trembles, you add a pinch of loose black tea, cheap, bitter, and strong enough to wake the dead. The scent blooms instantly, earthy and rich, mingling with smoke and the faint musk of wool drying near the fire. The first sip stings. It tastes of metal, tannin, and salvation. Heat floods your mouth, then races down your chest, thawing every complaint your body might have. Outside, the thermometer reads 58 degrees Celsius, but inside, the steam on your face feels like forgiveness. The trick, everyone says, is to drink slowly. Burn your tongue and you lose a day's pleasure. Drink too fast and you lose the joy of watching the frost on the window weep. Across the room, your host, an old man named Pyotr, sits carving a piece of birch wood into a spoon. His beard holds flecks of ice like jewels, though he hasn't stepped outside in hours. He tells you that when he was a boy, they used to hang wet towels outside just to hear them shatter. You laugh softly, unsure if it's a joke. He shrugs and says, "We found joy where it didn't belong." Then he pours another cup. You cradle the tea carefully, fingers wrapped around the cup as if clutching a living thing. The heat bites at first, then settles into your palms. That's the secret of survival here, learning to welcome pain when it comes from warmth. The windows glow faintly, their frost patterns shifting as the interior air gains strength. Outside, the village moves in slow procession, dogs trotting through powdery snow, smoke unraveling above rooftops, a sled gliding past with bundles of firewood strapped tight. There's a rhythm to daily life in Oymyakon that feels less like habit and more like negotiation. Every action, from boiling water to opening a door, is an agreement with the cold. When you step outside with your cup to watch the village, the heat leaves your tea almost instantly, replaced by a skin of ice that cracks when you tilt it. You smile anyway. This place is impossible, yet somehow still human. Down the street, a woman stands outside a small kiosk wrapped in layers of patterned shawls. She sells candles, canned goods, and something that looks like candy but is in fact solidified condensed milk, sweet, dense, and stubborn. She cracks one piece against a counter and hands it to a child who tucks it into a mitten to soften. You watch as they exchange no words, just a nod. The transaction feels ancient, like the passing of flame from one torch to another. The air carries a faint sound, the hollow ring of an axe striking wood, followed by a pause. The wood itself groans as it splits. In this cold, even trees complain before surrendering. You sip again, though the tea has cooled to lukewarm, and the steam now drifts sluggishly, like ghosts uncertain of direction. Inside the nearest house, laughter bursts out, quick, bright, and brief. Someone must have told the story of the frozen fish kiss. It's a local favorite. A young man once dared to press his lips to a fish fresh from the ice hole, insisting he could free it with warmth alone. He succeeded only in pulling away with the fish still attached. The story always ends the same way, with someone remarking, "That's why we don't trust passion here." Your hands grow steady again, warmth lingering beneath the skin. You decide to pour one last cup, adding a spoonful of sugar that clinks faintly against the glass. Sugar is a luxury this far north, every grain a gift dragged across hundreds of frozen miles. Pyotr tells you that during the Soviet years, caravans brought it in barrels wrapped in hay, guarded like treasure. Even now, he says, tea without sugar tastes like resignation. Outside, the aurora stirs faintly. Though it's still early, wisps of green thread through the pale sky, twisting like silk ribbons caught on an invisible current. You step closer to the window, feeling its chill seep through your sleeves. The air smells faintly metallic, as if light itself had a flavor. The cup grows lighter in your hands, and your reflection in the tea's surface wavers with each breath. You think about what it means to live here, to wake each day to numbers the human body was never meant to read. Yet, the people of Oymyakon endure with a kind of quiet humor that feels almost defiant. When asked how they stand the cold, they answer simply, "We don't. It stands us." The room softens as the fire settles into its evening rhythm. Shadows climb the walls, and the sound of the kettle slowing its hiss becomes oddly comforting. You pull your shawl tighter, letting the warmth sink into your bones. Outside, the horizon begins its slow fade to indigo. The tea, now gone, leaves behind a faint film at the bottom of the cup, a constellation of brown specks that could be mistaken for stars. You tilt it once more, catching the last trace of heat. It tastes faintly of metal, wood smoke, and endurance. Somewhere outside, the village bells ring, a dull, soft sound that doesn't echo. It marks no hour in particular. It simply reminds the valley that time continues, even here, even now. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the sound merge with the pulse of the stove and the hush of the world beyond the walls. When you open them again, the light has dimmed to the color of memory. The frost on the window glows softly and the air tastes faintly of iron and sweetness. You feel an odd peace, something close to gratitude. The tea has done its work, not just warming your body but tethering you gently to this frozen corner of the earth. Tomorrow there will be more boiling water, more cracked cups, more small miracles of warmth wrested from impossible air. For now, though, the village hums quietly around you, each house its own fragile lantern in the night. The village wakes again under a sky that never truly brightens, an indigo hush suspended over a landscape locked in crystal stillness. Beneath that stillness, though, there's motion, a slow mechanical pulse, the steady breath of machines refusing to die. You step outside and the sound reaches you immediately, the coughing rhythm of a truck idling in the distance, the sputtering loyalty of a generator, the deep, continuous hum of a diesel heart. Here in Oymyakon, metal must stay alive, or it shatters. The first thing you notice is the smell. It isn't the clean frost of untouched snow, but a faint perfume of exhaust and kerosene, the scent of survival disguised as industry. Each home guards its vehicle like an heirloom. Tarpaulins drape over engines like quilts and thick cords of extension wire snake across the snow to keep block heaters glowing. The sight of those cords, half buried and rimmed with frost, feels strangely tender, like lifelines keeping the village tethered to its own pulse. From the street corner, Vasily waves again, his fur hat pulled low. He's already brushing a layer of frost from his old Soviet UAZ truck, a vehicle so stubborn it has outlasted 3 mayors and 1 post office. He laughs when you ask if he ever turns it off. Only for weddings and funerals, he says, his breath crystallizing instantly. The engine growls behind him, idling with the guttural patience of an animal bred for hardship. You watch as he feeds a splash of gasoline into a small metal stove, the flame bursting to life with a muted thump. Its heat flows beneath the truck's belly through a network of bent tin ducts, a homemade preheater, part science, part devotion. Every man here knows the ritual by heart. If you love your machine, you keep it warm. If you don't, the cold will claim it by morning. Nearby, a young mechanic named Lida works under a corrugated awning, her gloves black with oil and frost. The air around her shimmers faintly with heat from a portable furnace. She's replacing a frozen battery, muttering a Yakut proverb. The cold respects only movement. Her tools lie spread out on a sheepskin mat to keep them from bonding to the ground. She moves quickly, efficiently, each motion measured to minimize contact with steel. Even a moment's carelessness could glue skin to metal. A faint rhythmic ping fills the silence, the sound of an idling exhaust pipe cooling slightly, then heating again, expanding and contracting like a beating heart. Around you, the air seems to vibrate softly, alive with the whisper of combustion. This mechanical choir sustains the village as surely as bread or firewood. You step closer to one of the running trucks, placing your hand an inch from the exhaust. The heat feels impossibly precious, as if the entire world's warmth had gathered here in a trembling column of invisible air. A small dog slinks nearby, curling itself against the truck's side panel to steal that warmth. It sighs audibly, eyes half closed, fur puffed in gratitude. Even the animals here understand thermodynamics by instinct. A few meters away, another man cranks a snowmobile to life. The machine sputters, then growls, releasing a puff of blue smoke that drifts into the air and freezes mid-motion before dispersing. He revs the throttle twice, listening to the pitch as if it were a language. "Good," he murmurs, satisfied that the cold hasn't won today. In Oymyakon, engines are not tools. They are companions, fragile, temperamental, and utterly essential. The hum of machinery blends with the village's other sounds: the squeak of boots, the distant chopping of wood, the faint murmur of a radio playing a Yakut folk song, whose rhythm mimics the heartbeat of a generator. The combination feels oddly symphonic, each note contributing to the same unending refrain of endurance. You pause beside a small shed, where a child has drawn shapes in the frost with a stick, stars perhaps, or gears. The child's mittens are too big, and their laughter steams into the air like incense. Behind them, their father bends over a motorcycle, wrapped in layers of felt, coaxing the carburetor with a breath of warm air from a blowtorch. It looks absurdly dangerous, but somehow it works. You can smell the sharp tang of gasoline and scorched metal. The spark catches, the engine coughs, and then roars awake like an old bear disturbed from hibernation. The father grins, triumphant, and the child claps mittened hands. A gust of wind slides through the alley, sharp and dry. It carries with it a faint music, the jingling of chains, the flutter of a plastic tarp, the metallic sigh of cooling pipes. You realize that every sound here comes from struggle made audible. Even the stillness of snow seems to listen, waiting for the next engine to stutter or sing. By midday, a few trucks gather near the main road, their hoods open like mouths inhaling heat. Men cluster around them, trading stories through scarves. They speak of temperature the way others speak of politics. Half complaint, half pride. Someone claims it hit 71 once, though the official record is less. Someone else laughs and says that when it's cold enough, even vodka turns into a crystal. The group nods solemnly, as if confirming a law of physics. You can't help smiling. This is the kind of humor that lives only in places where everything else could die. As afternoon wanes, if the pale sky can be called that, the engines continue their endless vigil. The air smells thickly of fuel now, a perfume of endurance that seeps into your clothes. You return to Pyotcha's cabin and find the old man polishing the iron samovar, its brass fittings gleaming like captured sunlight. He says the generator coughed once this morning but kept running. He pats the wall affectionately, as though it too has lungs and patience. From the window you can see the street again. A frozen river of faint smoke and flickering exhaust. A mechanical lifeline stretching through silence. You think about what it means to live somewhere where warmth depends not only on flame but on the faithfulness of pistons. The hum outside feels steady now, almost like a lullaby. As the last of the day fades, the temperature drops again. The engine's voices grow deeper, thicker, as though settling in for the night. One by one their owners step outside with flashlights, checking, listening, touching hoods with gloved hands. Each nods in quiet approval when the sound continues. There's a strange comfort in this ritual, the idea that even machines need to be reassured, and that reassurance must be spoken in the language of fuel and fire. The night settles softly, the aurora faint above the horizon. The hum continues. A gentle chorus of defiance echoing across the valley. You close your eyes for a moment, hearing it through the wooden walls, that low, persistent song of survival. Somewhere deep in the earth, permafrost listens, unbothered, ancient, above it. The engines keep their vigil. And inside your chest, something mirrors them, a small, steady rhythm that refuses to go quiet. The day begins with a brittle sound, an axe striking ice. It rings through the valley, clear and sharp, bouncing off the low wooden houses like a bell calling the village to duty. Every morning in Oymyakon begins this way, not with an alarm but with a conversation between steel and frozen water. You follow the sound down toward the river, where a line of figures moves slowly through the mist, bundled so thickly they could be mistaken for spirits. The Kolyma River lies beneath them, wide and silent, its surface frozen into a pale blue crust that stretches to the horizon. Beneath that crust, water still moves, sluggish and secretive. The villagers call it the river's bone, not truly alive, yet not dead either. The air grows sharper as you approach. Every breath cuts. Every word must be rationed. The smell here is different too. Mineral, metallic and clean, tinged with smoke from the fires burning in small metal barrels along the shore. Around each barrel, a circle of fishermen warms their hands, faces lit by orange flame against the white abyss. You step closer to one of them, a man named Anatoly, whose eyebrows have frozen into pale commas. He nods, gestures for you to watch. His gloves are enormous, patched with reindeer hide, and his movements slow and sure. With practiced rhythm, he swings the axe into the ice, sending up shards that glitter like ground glass. The sound is mesmerizing, a hollow thunk, followed by a soft crackle as fissures spread through the surface. It takes nearly an hour before the hole is wide enough for the next act of patience. A handmade auger follows, its spiral blade squealing faintly as it bites deeper. The ice reveals its layers, white, grey, blue, each one a record of months spent resisting the sky. When at last the auger bursts through, a faint plume of steam rises and the men lean closer to look. There it is, the moving water, dark and shining, carrying small flecks of silver. Life, hidden beneath death's veneer. Anatoly lowers a net into the opening. He waits without speaking, his breath freezing into lace on his scarf. After a minute, he hauls it up with a smooth motion. Several small fish gleam inside, instantly stiffening in the air. He lays them in a wooden crate where they freeze solid before he can even fold the net again. This is nature's freezer, flawless and eternal. He grins at your wide-eyed look and offers one of the fish for you to touch. The body is so hard it might as well be carved from marble. Good for 3 years, he says, dryly, setting it aside. Or longer, if you're patient. Then, almost as an afterthought, he adds, "We never lose food here. Only fingers sometimes." His laughter floats across the ice, brittle but sincere. Nearby, another fisherman pours water into a kettle and sets it beside the fire. The steam curls upward, fragrant with metal and wood. You cup your hands around it, grateful for the momentary illusion of comfort. When the tea boils, they pass it around in tin mugs, sharing not just warmth but camaraderie. In a place where nothing grows, generosity becomes the only crop. Every few minutes, the wind shifts, and your clothes stiffen under a fresh layer of frost. Your eyelashes stick together, blurring the world into soft shapes. Even the sun looks distant, filtered through a haze of ice crystals suspended in the air. A diamond dust, they call it. A kind of frozen fog that turns the valley into a glittering dream. Farther down the riverbank, women in fur-trimmed coats break blocks of ice for household water. The sound of their axes joins the rhythm of the fishermen, forming an accidental symphony of survival. They pile the blocks onto sleds lined with straw, then cover them with cloth to keep the snow from fusing them together. One woman pauses to adjust her scarf, revealing cheeks flushed red and eyes bright with something that looks like stubborn joy. The villagers move with deliberate slowness, each motion thought out in advance, no energy wasted. You realize that in Oymyakon, time itself has learned to walk carefully. By midday, the fish have been sorted and stored in a shed whose walls are lined with frost as thick as bark. There's no smell, no decay, no rot, just silence and cold perfection. You pick up one of the fish, admiring the strange beauty of it, the skin stretched smooth and glistening, the eyes turned to milky quartz. In another place it would seem morbid. Here, it's simply practical. As you help carry the crates back toward the village, the snow crunches underfoot with that high-pitched squeal unique to temperatures below 50 degrees Celsius. Each step feels like breaking glass. The air burns your lungs, but you keep moving. Above you, thin plumes of smoke mark the homes, each chimney a fragile sign of persistence. When you reach Piotr's cabin again, the old man greets you with a grin and a steaming bowl of stroganina. sliced raw fish, paper thin, served with salt and a dash of mustard. The taste is clean and electric, almost luminous, like eating winter itself. He tells you that travelers used to stop here on their way to Kolyma, the road once called the Road of Bones. Many never made it through the cold. But we, he says, tapping his chest, we are made of frost too. You sit together by the fire, thawing your boots, the room filling with the faint scent of tea and pine resin. The walls creak softly, expanding with warmth, and outside the wind sings through the chimney. You glance toward the window, where the frost has formed tiny, perfect feathers. The world beyond it glows faintly blue, endless and quiet. As evening gathers, the fishermen return home one by one, sleds creaking behind them. The dogs bark lazily, their breath forming halos around their heads. From every doorway spills a brief square of yellow light before closing again. The sound of the river fades, replaced by the slow ticking of stoves, the murmured chatter of families settling in. Somewhere in the distance, a radio plays an old Yakut song, low, rhythmic and haunting. It speaks of rivers that never sleep, of people who learn to live without thawing. You listen, eyes heavy, and think how true that is. This village has mastered the art of motion within stillness, warmth within cold. You lean back. The fires glow soft on your face, the taste of fish and tea lingering on your tongue. The world outside is a frozen cathedral, and you, for this moment, are part of its silent congregation. Morning returns with a muted creak of timber and the soft scrape of a shovel against packed snow. The air inside the cabin glows faintly amber, but the light outside still carries that unbroken bluish tint of eternal dawn. The stove hums again, and you can already hear the faint laughter of children somewhere down the lane, muffled by layers of scarves and the weight of the air itself. It's a school day, unless the mercury says otherwise. The village rule is simple and sacred. Classes are cancelled only when the temperature falls below 52 degrees Celsius. Not 50, not 51, 52 exactly. That single number hangs over every child's morning like an unspoken prayer. Parents whisper it over breakfast. Teachers glance at the thermometer nailed to the schoolhouse door, and children pretend not to care, though everyone secretly hopes for the same thing, frost's mercy. You follow the narrow path toward the small wooden building that serves as the school. Its roofline droops under a crown of snow, and thin smoke curls lazily from the chimney. The sound of boots on snow echoes hollowly. Each step seems to exist in its own private silence. Near the door, a group of students stands huddled, faces half buried in scarves, eyes peering out through halos of fur. Their breath floats in the air like small silver birds. The teacher, a woman named Yelena, steps outside, thermometer in hand. Her eyelashes sparkle with frost as she squints at the thin column of mercury. The children wait without speaking, the suspense stretching like a frozen rope. Yelena tilts the glass, reads the line, and smiles faintly. -51, she announces. A collective groan ripples through the group. School is on. Inside, the building feels warmer, though the floorboards groan under each step. The scent of coal smoke and chalk powder fills the air, mingling with something faintly sweet, perhaps boiled jam from someone's lunch tin. The walls are lined with posters from the 1980s, their edges curled, colors faded by decades of stove heat. On one wall, a map of Russia spans from the Arctic to the Pacific, the ink cracked like old paint. Someone has drawn a small heart around Oymyakon's name. The children peel off their outer layers, revealing sweaters thick enough to stand on their own. Their cheeks glow red and frost melts from their hair in tiny droplets that sizzle faintly on the stove's iron lid. The room hums with low chatter as mittens are hung near the fire, steam rising in lazy spirals. Yelena claps her hands, and the murmuring fades. She begins the lesson. Her voice clear and steady. They're studying geography today, tracing rivers that are frozen most of the year, mountains that cast shadows across tundra, and towns whose names sound like lullabies in another language. Every now and then she pauses to cup her hands over the stove, rubbing warmth back into her fingers. You notice how the children copy her gestures unconsciously, as if warmth itself were a shared language. Halfway through the lesson, a small boy raises his hand and asks, "Why don't we move somewhere warm?" The class laughs softly, and Yelena smiles. "Because warmth makes people lazy," she says, half teasing, half serious. "And the cold keeps our hearts awake." The children nod solemnly, as though she's quoting scripture. Outside, the wind picks up, brushing snow off the roof in slow cascades. The faint clatter of ice against glass punctuates Yelena's words. From the stove rises a steady rhythm of pops and sighs, the song of fire negotiating with metal. You can feel the pulse of the room, 30 souls keeping one another warm simply by existing together. During recess, the children burst out into the yard, their energy cutting through the air like sunlight. They build snow forts taller than themselves, their mittens thudding against compacted snow that squeals like styrofoam. A few toss handfuls into the air just to watch it shimmer and fall as silver dust. Laughter rings clear and sharp, slicing through the silence of the valley. One boy, perhaps 8 or 9, has brought a small plastic bottle filled with water. He pours it out in a wide arc, and it turns instantly into a white cloud of crystals that hang for a heartbeat before raining down as tiny needles. The others gasp and cheer, their voices cracking from cold and joy. Science lessons here are often improvised. The cold itself is the curriculum. You glance back toward the schoolhouse. A hand-lettered sign above the door reads, "Uchinya sweat." Knowledge is light. The irony is not lost on anyone. In this valley, sunlight may fail, but learning must not. Inside again, the classroom smells faintly of wool, smoke, and wet mittens. The stove roars cheerfully as the children settle for their afternoon lesson. Someone's sandwich has frozen solid, and they laugh as Yelena helps warm it against the stove's edge. The bread softens slightly, and steam rises in thin curls. Next time, she says gently, "Wrap it in your heart." The phrase makes them giggle. Outside, the mercury dips a little lower, sliding just shy of the line that would end the day. But the children hardly notice anymore. Their laughter fills the room, bright as a hearth. You watch as one girl sketches a reindeer on the corner of her paper, the pencil lead faintly squeaking. Another hums under her breath, a tune that sounds like a lullaby you've never heard before but somehow recognize. When the final bell sounds, a soft clang from an iron triangle hung near the door, the children dress again, layer upon layer until they resemble colorful snowmen. Their movements are clumsy but their spirits light. They tumble into the fading afternoon, leaving behind a room filled with steam, chalk dust, and the lingering warmth of small bodies in defiance of the impossible. Yelena stays behind, sweeping the floor with a slow rhythm. She glances once more at the thermometer outside the window, watching the mercury sink by another degree. Her expression is calm, almost reverent. For her, each day taught above 52 degrees Celsius is a victory, proof that endurance can be an education of its own. You linger a moment longer, listening to the muffled voices fading down the lane, the creak of sleds, and the whisper of the wind rearranging snowdrifts. Somewhere behind you the stove breathes, a steady companion. You step outside into the pale twilight and feel the air seize your breath again, sharp and immediate. The stars are already visible, small and piercing, as though someone has poked holes in the fabric of the sky. In Oymyakon, school is not just about reading or writing. It's a quiet apprenticeship in endurance, a daily test measured not in grades but in degrees. And tonight, the mercury has passed again by a single trembling line. Evening descends like ink poured slowly across the sky. The light fades not all at once, but in careful gradations, grey to violet, violet to a deep blue that hums faintly in your ears. The village prepares for night with the deliberate rhythm of people who have repeated the same motions for generations. Each action is small and essential, Wood stacked beside the stove, kettles refilled, lamps trimmed, dogs fed. Warmth here is not found, it is built one ember at a time. Inside Piotr's cabin, the stove glows like a small sun behind its iron door. The air is thick with the scent of birch smoke and tea leaves. His wife, Galina, hums softly as she ladles soup into enamel bowls, a clear broth with chunks of frozen venison thawed in milk and onions that were stored under the floorboards. The smell is faintly sweet, comforting, and primal. You sit near the fire, feeling its heat crawl gently through your clothes until your bones stop whispering. The table creaks under the weight of simple abundance: black bread, pickled cabbage, a jar of cloudberry jam glowing amber in the lamplight. Steam fogs the windows, blurring the frost feathers into soft white smudges. Outside, the wind prowls around the eaves, tugging at the shutters, but inside everything feels round and still, as if the room itself has drawn breath and is holding it. Galina sets down a glass of vodka beside your bowl. "Only one," she warns with mock sternness. "Otherwise you'll start thinking the snow is talking to you." Her eyes sparkle as she says it, but you suspect she's half serious. The first sip burns sweetly, leaving behind a warmth so sharp it almost feels like laughter in liquid form. Piotr chuckles, saying that vodka here is more medicine than indulgence. It thins the blood, he claims, or maybe it just teaches it how to dance. After supper, conversation unfolds the way it always does, slowly, circularly, like smoke rising from a wick. They tell stories that feel both ancient and recent, tales of hunters who followed the aurora too far north and returned with white hair, of reindeer that led travelers home during blizzards, of frost spirits that walk the riverbank, jealous of human fire. Each story is told with straight faces, not as superstition but as respect. The cold is alive here, and the people know it listens. Galina pokes the fire, sending a shower of sparks upward. "Once, when I was a girl," she begins, "the cold was so deep the stars made noise." You raise an eyebrow, and she smiles, pleased to have your disbelief. "They did," she insists. "When it's still enough, and colder than memory, they crackle tiny sounds like fingernails on glass." Piotr nods solemnly beside her, as though confirming a law of physics too delicate for outsiders to understand. Outside, the aurora begins to wake, its green ribbons flickering faintly above the frozen roofs. Galina dims the lamp, and for a long moment no one speaks. The room fills with that strange electric silence that comes when nature performs something holy. The light outside ripples slow and sinuous, casting moving shadows across the frost. It feels as if the sky itself is breathing. Piotr clears his throat. "You know, they say if you whistle at the northern lights, they'll come down and take your soul." You start to laugh, but he raises a finger. "So we watch, but we don't whistle." His voice is calm, almost tender. You nod, and together you sit in silence, watching light dance in the coldest air on earth. After a while, the fire settles into a gentle rhythm. Crack, sigh, pop. The dog by the door shifts, stretching its paws and letting out a long breath that curls into the air like a ghost. Piotr begins to tell a story about the old days, when reindeer still outnumbered people and the mail came by sled once a month. He speaks not with nostalgia, but with pride. "We had nothing soft then," he says. "No easy roads, but we had each other, and that was enough." Galina smiles and begins knitting, her needles clicking softly, matching the stove's heartbeat. You realize that every sound in this room, the knitting, the fire, even Piotr's slow words, is a form of warmth, small threads woven into the larger fabric of survival. When the conversation drifts, Galina fetches a small tin from the shelf. Inside are sugar cubes and a few preserved lemon slices, translucent as amber. She drops one into her tea and pushes the tin toward you. The sweetness shocks your tongue, bright and alive like a spark of summer hidden in glass. You find yourself laughing at nothing, lulled by the ease of the moment. Outside, the wind begins to wail faintly, A thin, reedy song moving through the valley. The sound rises and falls like the call of something enormous and invisible. Piotr listens for a moment, then shrugs. That sits just the mountain talking, he says. It likes to remind us who sits older. The night deepens, shadows grow long, and the lamplight fades to a dull gold. The stories taper into silence, replaced by the steady breathing of the fire. For the first time in hours, you notice how warm you are. Your skin hums softly with it, your heart beats slow and content. Galina stands, stretches and covers the kettle to keep the warmth until morning. The trick, she says, turning toward you, is to never let anything go cold completely. Not water, not hands, not hope. Then she smiles, pats your shoulder, and disappears behind the curtain that leads to the sleeping room. Piotr lingers by the stove, poking the coals one last time. "We're not brave," he says quietly. "We're just too stubborn to freeze." He chuckles, replaces the iron lid, and the room settles into its final stillness. You sit a while longer, listening to the slow ticking of cooling metal, the murmur of the wind, the faint flutter of the aurora against the sky. In Oymyakon, warmth is more than comfort. It's faith made physical, passed from hand to hand in cups of tea, bowls of soup, and stories told to remind one another that even here, where the earth itself seems asleep, hearts can stay awake. Morning rises reluctantly, a pale suggestion of gold diffused through the ice fog. The air feels heavier than the day before, a dense stillness that presses against every sound. Yet from the center of the village comes a faint, rhythmic pulse, the weekly market stirring to life. In Oymyakon, where travel is measured in frozen rivers and courage, the market is less a place of commerce than of communion. You follow the sound, boots crunching along the narrow lane that leads toward it. The market occupies the main clearing between the church and the post office, both squat buildings half swallowed by snowdrifts. Beneath a row of canvas awnings rimmed with frost, vendors unpack their wares, bundles of fur, jars of pickles, bottles of homemade vodka, bricks of frozen milk as pale as alabaster. The air smells of diesel, pine and meat, smoked long ago but still carrying a whisper of fire. Each breath hangs in front of you, a fleeting ghost that trembles before dissolving. You pause beside a stall where a woman in a thick wool shawl chip slices off a block of horse meat with a cleaver. Each chip falls with the sound of porcelain breaking. She places the shards carefully into a paper bag, nodding her thanks when a man pays with a handful of crumpled rubles. Coins here are useless. Fingers cannot count well when wrapped in mittens. Every exchange is a small act of trust, a shared understanding that life is worth more than arithmetic. The wind catches a strand of her hair and freezes it mid-motion, a halo of glass fibers glinting in the weak light. She laughs softly when she sees your expression. "Pretty, isn't it?" she says in careful Russian. Cold makes everyone a statue for a while. Then she turns back to her work, face serene as if chiseling eternity into shape. Farther along, two men argue over the price of fox pelts. Their voices rise only slightly, more habit than hostility. The sound of their laughter follows quickly after, merging with the low hum of conversation. Here, voices do not carry far. They are swallowed by the air before reaching the next stall. The market speaks in murmurs, in breath more than words. A group of children runs past, pulling a wooden sled loaded with fish frozen in mid-swim. They stop beside a samovar steaming on a metal table, its plume of vapor twisting skyward like the soul of the market itself. The vendor pours tea into tin cups, and the scent cuts through the cold like a melody. Black tea mixed with sugar and lemon, the aroma almost dizzying after hours of sterile frost. You take a cup when offered, the heat burning through your gloves. The first sip is a small miracle, so bright it brings tears to your eyes. The woman running the stall smiles knowingly. "Hot enough to remember summer," she says. The steam curls around her words as though reluctant to leave. A man next to her sells boots lined with dog fur, his voice hoarse from decades of cold. He tells you that each pair takes 3 weeks to make and will outlast 2 winters if treated well. He lifts one, taps it against the table. It makes a dull, solid sound, like the heart of the earth. You run your fingers along the fur, soft as smoke, and imagine the endless steps they've taken through snowfields and silence. At the far end of the square, a musician stands beside an old accordion, its bellows patched with tape. He plays a tune that sounds like thawing ice, slow, uneven, full of yearning. The notes hang in the air longer than they should, freezing into echoes that drift among the stalls. People pause to listen, some smiling, others nodding with quiet nostalgia. When the song ends, the musician bows deeply. Someone places a slice of frozen bread in his gloved hand instead of money. He nods gratefully. A faint mist of breath and steam rises from the market, blurring faces and outlines until everything seems part of the same painting. Smoke, snow, light, and life mingled together. The ground beneath you is hard as stone, yet every footstep seems to leave an impression that glows briefly before fading. You notice a small stand at the edge of the square where an elderly man sells kerosene in repurposed vodka bottles. His beard is white and stiff, his eyes pale blue like glacial ice. For lamps, he says, holding one up to the light. Without them, night is too big. His voice is gentle but carries the certainty of someone who has lived through more winters than he can count. You buy a bottle mostly for the conversation, and he nods in approval. Light, he adds quietly, is our only luxury. Around noon, the faintest sunlight slips through the fog, turning the market into a cathedral of glitter. Every flake of frost catches the light, and for a few fleeting minutes the entire square shimmers. People lift their heads, eyes squinting, faces transformed. It's not quite warmth, but it feels like grace. Someone jokes that the sun must have gotten lost, and laughter ripples through the crowd. The sound is thin but genuine, the kind of laughter that keeps people alive. By afternoon, the crowd begins to thin. Horses snort clouds of vapor as they pull sleds loaded with firewood and goods. Vendors pack their wares with the same care monks might use for sacred texts, wrapping each item in cloth and placing it gently into crates. The market dissolves as it appeared, without hurry, without ceremony, like a dream retreating into its own silence. You linger as the last stall closes, the air filled with the echo of footsteps and the fading warmth of engines starting for the ride home. A single kettle still steams near the samovar stand, its lid rattling softly. The woman who served tea earlier waves goodbye, her breath shining in the dim light. The square empties. What remains is the scent of smoke, the faint sparkle of frost where people once stood, and the lingering echo of human presence, brief, fragile, and radiant against the eternal cold. You realize that this is Oymyakon's truest ritual, gathering together just long enough to remind one another that no one endures alone. You turn back toward Piotr's cabin, your breath rising like incense into the still air. Behind you, the market fades into quiet, the silence so deep it feels alive. The snow absorbs every sound until all that remains is the faint whisper of your own steps, soft, steady, and human. By late winter, the days have fused together, each one a repetition of pale light and long shadow. The horizon smolders with the suggestion of dawn, then fades again before you can decide whether it was morning or memory. In Oymyakon, the sun is less an object and more a rumor, spoken of fondly, like a relative who once visited but never wrote back. The cabin creaks under its burden of frost. Frost has weight here. You can hear it settling, sighing against the roof beams. The air inside tastes faintly metallic, tinged with the breath of the stove and the residue of coal smoke that never quite leaves. Galina moves through the dimness, like a silhouette cut from amber light. She pours tea, checks the fire, hums the same tune she hummed yesterday, and perhaps the day before. The body learns this rhythm instinctively, waking, tending, waiting, surviving. Outside, the world glows a dull blue. The snow has ceased to fall, but the air is still full of ice, tiny crystals suspended in silence, catching what little light there is and turning it into a fine dust that seems to hang forever. Every step you take compresses the snow into squealing protest, each sound sharp and immediate, the echo swallowed before it travels a meter. You make your way toward the edge of the village, where the frozen plain opens like an ocean without a horizon. Here the cold feels different, cleaner, emptier, more absolute. There are no trees, no motion, only a great white stillness that absorbs all thought. It's said that when you walk alone out here, the air itself begins to whisper. You almost believe it. The reindeer herders have pitched a small shelter near the ridge. Smoke trickles upward from a chimney no larger than a wrist. Inside, 3 men sit cross-legged on the floor, faces ruddy, hands cupped around mugs of broth. They greet you with nods, then resume their quiet work repairing harness straps stiffened by frost. The smell of singed hide and boiled bone fills the cramped space, oddly comforting. One of them, an older man named Sergei, gestures toward the kettle. "Drink," he says simply. The broth is salty and thick, tasting of earth and endurance. Conversation drifts like smoke. They talk about wolves that came too close last week, about fuel deliveries delayed by storms, about a cousin in Yakutsk who sent a letter describing traffic lights and thawed sidewalks. The words feel foreign here, luxuries from another planet. Sergei smiles without bitterness. "City people," he says, "they chase time. We let it chase us." You step outside again. The dim sky hovers low, pressing against the valley like a hand. The faintest band of red hangs near the horizon, the sun's ghost promising to rise tomorrow and perhaps meaning it. The cold pinches your face so sharply it feels like clarity. Every breath burns. Every exhale hangs as a tiny, perfect cloud. In the distance, the aurora stirs even before full darkness. Threads of green unfurl lazily, folding upon themselves like slow waves. The dogs near the huts begin to bark, their voices muffled by the thick air. Someone laughs and shouts a warning. Never whistle at the lights, or they'll come down to steal your voice. The sound of laughter lingers, small and brave. Back in the village, lanterns bloom one by one behind the windows. Each house becomes an island of gold floating in a sea of blue. You pass the schoolhouse. Silent now, its thermometer dimly visible through the frost. The mercury has vanished into the bulb again, hiding from the cold. The sign above the door, Uchinia, sweat, seems almost ironic in this twilight world. Learning is light, and yet light itself is a myth these days. You return to Piotr's cabin just as the wind begins to rise. It moves through the valley like breath through a flute, low and mournful. Inside, the room glows with firelight. The old man looks up from sharpening his knife and nods. "Storm coming," he says simply. He sets the blade aside and adds more wood to the stove. The flame leaps, grateful for the offering. For a while you sit together without speaking. The wind presses against the walls. Snow hisses along the window sills. The dog curls tighter by the door. Galina mends a tear in a blanket, her needle glinting in the flicker of fire. The rhythm of her stitches becomes hypnotic. Forward, pull, knot, forward again. Time itself seems to follow that motion. When the storm hits full force, it is not sound but vibration. A deep, continuous murmur that runs through the floorboards and into your chest. The fire snaps back, momentarily dimmed, then steadies. You watch the flames bend in the draught, their edges blue with heat. Pietro rises to check the latch, muttering an old saying, "Close the door on the wind, or it will sleep in your bed." Hours pass. The storm eases. The silence that follows feels enormous. You step outside once more, into a world remade. The snowdrifts have shifted, sculpted by invisible hands into smooth waves that gleam faintly under the aurora's pale glow. The village is buried to its knees, roofs wearing white crowns. The air is so still you can hear your heartbeat inside your scarf. Above, the stars have returned, thousands of them, so bright they seem to hum. You remember Galina's story about stars making noise when it's cold enough, and you listen carefully. Perhaps she was right. There's a faint, crystalline sound, so delicate you could mistake it for the blood in your ears. You stand there for a long time, feeling impossibly small and impossibly alive. When you finally turn back toward the cabin, the door's glow beckons like a promise. Inside, warmth waits, soft and unquestioning. The day has folded back into night, the sun forgotten again, but life here continues its steady pulse. You understand now that this darkness is not emptiness. It's the fabric of Oymyakon itself, woven from patience, breath, and the quiet, stubborn light of human endurance. The final hours of the day descend without fanfare. In Oymyakon, night doesn't arrive. It simply grows thicker, like ink deepening in water. You feel it settling in the rafters, in the folds of your clothes, in the rhythm of your breathing. Outside the cabin window, the world gleams faintly beneath a thin veil of ice fog. Each house glows like a small lantern, swallowed by the infinite. Pyotr's stove gives one last sigh before falling into a steady, satisfied hum. Galina moves quietly through the room, tidying with the same reverence others might reserve for prayer. She stacks wood in even rows, shakes snow from a fur coat, and adjusts the kettle lid so it won't rattle. The small acts of closure feel deliberate, ceremonial rituals that hold the dark at bay. You sit near the stove, watching the last of the day's frost melt into thin threads of water that slide down the window pane before freezing again halfway. The air tastes faintly of smoke, iron, and pine resin. Somewhere outside, a dog barks once, a lonely sound quickly swallowed by the cold. The aurora trembles faintly beyond the roofline, its light diffused by fog, green melting into violet. Galina hands you a blanket woven from reindeer wool. It's heavy, rough, and warm. She smiles faintly, saying, "Now you understand our real luxury is heaviness. A good blanket, a full stove, a heart that doesn't give up." Her voice carries no drama, only calm truth. Pyotr nods from his chair, the lines of his face softened by firelight. "Tomorrow," he says, "it will be the same. Cold, work, tea. But we'll still be here." You sip your tea slowly, the steam curling around your face like a memory. The taste is faintly sweet with lemon and smoke. Each swallow feels slower than the last. As though the world itself were easing into sleep, the fire pops, scattering a brief constellation of sparks against the iron door. Outside, the temperature has dropped again, perhaps past 60 degrees Celsius. The frost creeps along the edges of the doorframe, building its lacework in silence. The air beyond it is utterly still, so dense it seems to muffle time itself. The village is asleep, no engines running now, no footsteps crunching across the snow, only the faint hum of the earth frozen beneath your feet. You lean closer to the window. The glass glows faintly from the reflection of the fire. Beyond it, the world is reduced to shades of blue and silver. The moon hangs low, haloed by ice crystals, and the snowdrifts glimmer as if dusted with powdered glass. Every sound has been folded into stillness. Even your breath seems reluctant to disturb the peace. A strange, quiet peace fills you, something like reverence. You think of the fishermen at the river, the children watching the thermometer, the engines that never sleep, the market steaming in the fog. Each life here is a small flame, fragile but persistent, protected by ritual and habit. There's a beauty in that fragility, a truth the modern world often forgets, that endurance can be a kind of grace. Pyotr rises, banking the fire carefully, leaving only a low orange glow. "Sleep," he says. The cold doesn't bother dreams. You smile at that, pulling the blanket closer. Galina dims the lamp and the room shrinks to darkness, broken only by the stove's faint breath. The rhythm of the place settles around you, the gentle crackle of wood, The slow ticking of the kettle, the distant whisper of wind moving through snow-laden trees. Each sound fades gradually, until all that remains is warmth against your skin and the slow, steady pulse of your own breathing. Your eyes grow heavy. The cold beyond the walls becomes abstract, a rumor from another world. Here, inside this tiny circle of heat, time softens. The mind begins to drift, first through the cabin, then out across the village, past the frozen river, over the endless plains where frost meets stars. The lights of Oymyakon gleam below like a scattering of embers, each house holding fast against the darkness. You feel yourself dissolving into that landscape, becoming part of its rhythm, half human, half echo. The wind shifts once more, brushing against the cabin, a soft exhale from the world outside. And then, in the space between waking and sleep, everything slows, the warmth, the silence, the faint shimmer of aurora through your eyelids, all merge into stillness. The last sound you hear is the gentle sigh of the stove as it settles into embers. The air feels weightless, your thoughts as slow as drifting snow. The world narrows to darkness, to breath, to the smallest flicker of warmth beneath your ribs, and then fades quietly, like a candle going out,